Welcome. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here for this beautiful occasion. We are just coming together to show our commitment to really work together and really move this profession forward in even a more amazing way. So as you're coming in, just take this time to familiarize yourself. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A little button in the bottom of the computer. You can find that. Oh, here's the poll already. Here's a wonderful opportunity to let us know where you're actually chiming in from today. I'm going to go ahead and participate with you because this is about inclusion. So as the oh, darn, it says I can't vote. Oh, well, okay, no worries. This is live and in the moment for sure, which is what yoga is all about and what yoga therapy is about, being in the present moment, adapting to the present moment. So welcome as you come in. Please feel free to take a part of the poll and provide an answer for me since I can't participate this time. As we settle into this moment, we're so honored to have you here. And if you feel comfortable, if you would like, maybe just take a couple deep breaths with me. Maybe you want to close your eyes for a moment. Maybe you want to notice just how awesome of a day it is. Just a couple more breaths here, just to bring our awareness into this space. And when you're ready, only when you're ready, maybe consider fluttering your eyes open. And for those of you that are joining with us today, my name is Marcia Banks Harold. I'm an electrical engineer, which has nothing to do with today's talk, but it really allowed me to be the yoga therapist that I am today and the yoga teacher that I am today. I'm the director of Pi's Fitness Holistic Yoga Therapy Training Program. And today we have so much great information for you. We're so honored to have you here. And we're going to be greeted by Stefan and Molly. And they're going to really allow us to really embark. And Krista, she's here too. She'll be helping with us to answer your questions and make this a memorable occasion for us all. So the overview of the program today is, you've already heard from me. I'll introduce my colleagues and thank them for coming in. We'll go over a little bit of question and answer time that I will kind of facilitate, and then we'll hear from your questions. So if you put them in the Q&A chat, we'll have a fabulous time together. So first, I'll introduce Molly. She's a fellow colleague of mine. Oh, well, here's the poll results here. Yeah, talking about being in the present moment. Here we are. Most people are here, 91% from North America, and then 1% from Central America, 1% from Africa, 5% from Europe. And let's see, we have a couple single people that are mathematically not raising to a percentage from North or Central Asia, and also Middle East, Western Asia. So we're really excited to have everyone here continue to participate here in this event with us. Okay, this is awesome. So Molly, yes, smile with me. I can't see you, but I hope you're smiling at home, because today is a very good day. It really represents the unification of our profession, and this is something to really celebrate. So today we have Molly with us. She is really an amazing, yes, there you are, Molly. Molly's an amazing person. She is a lead in her program, and all of her information will be available for you. The thing that I found really exciting, besides being a certified yoga therapist and a teacher and an author and an educator, is that Molly is an Ayurvedic chef. How cool is that? That is really important. When we talk about the scope of practice for all the things that we can do, this is a great opportunity to know that we can be yoga teachers, yoga therapists, we can be chefs. So that's my colleague, Molly. So thank you so much, Molly, for being here. And maybe you want to give us a couple comments about today's wonderful event.
Sure. Well, first of all, what a delight to be asked to be here. And Marcia, I'm so glad you're here too. Really, it's an honor to be with you, all of you. I want to say on behalf of IAYT, thank you to Yoga Alliance for hosting this important conversation. I think it's so important to see the efforts to acknowledge yoga therapy and to clarify the policies and message around the important, needed work of both yoga and yoga therapy, that we're having this conversation together. It's landmark. It's incredible. And I'm super excited about it.
Well, thank you so much, Molly. It's definitely a pleasure to be with you as well. And then Stefan, here you are. There's so many great things that I can say about you today. I will start with the fact that Stefan is 30 years in the physical therapy world and also a yoga teacher, educator, and a yoga therapist. So what a pleasure to have you here today. I think that the unique thing that I love about you is that you taught me how to really get to know my physical body. Remember when I was in yoga therapy school and you're like, no, Marcia, that's it right there. Touch that place so that you can really appreciate how you're going to be working with your clients. So Stefan, if you want to say a little bit about yourself, we'll jump right in.
Well, on the behalf of Yoga Alliance, I will echo Molly here. It's such a great time to see two organizations working more together, looking out for the whole yoga community and for the breadth of yoga. And I'm just honored to be here with Molly and Marcia and Krista and the whole community. It's a pure joy for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we're so glad to have both of you here. We're going to focus now on just a couple little questions, and then we'll circle back in later to get questions from our community at home. Before we jump into the questions, I'm just wanted to say how memorable today is. And so I'll start with a question. We'll start with you, Molly. What has really been your path to becoming a yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, a teacher in your program, on the IAYT board? These acronyms are so much fun. On the IAYT board, tell me, what has been your path like and what makes you continue to stick with it?
Sure. Okay. So first of all, I think my path to yoga and yoga therapy in some ways may be a little bit unique amongst my peers, because I didn't start out with an academic or medical background. And so I'm aware of that, right? But how it is akin to many of the people in the Yoga Alliance and the IAYT family is that I arrived to yoga for my own healing initially. And I think so many of us did. So what I learned on the mat, right, and coming to the mat and leaving the mat and coming back to the mat over and over again, changed my life. Really, like many people talk about how yoga saved their life, I would say that happened for me many times. And so once that happened, I knew that I wanted to study yoga. I knew that I wanted to really dive deep. So I took a 200-hour. And then, frankly, right away, I took a 500-hour because I was hungry. I was hungry for the education. I was hungry for the yoga. I was hungry for the healing. So I took those. I started to share what had helped me so much with so many different things that were going on with me and my health and well-being. So I started to share workshops and classes, but I always felt like I wanted more. And so I kept getting CEUs. I kept searching out training in yoga, yoga therapy, therapeutics, mental health training, Ayurveda, and then somatics. And so eventually what happened for me is I went the route of the grandparenting to get my CIAYT credentialing. And if you don't know what grandparenting is, it is when, we were allowed to bring our experience and our education and bring that forward through an approval process. And so that was my path to a CIAYT credential. I still hold dear and utilize my ERYT 500 credential as well, because I have a school that teaches 200, 500 and yoga therapy certification. So that's my path. And now there's other paths that I'm sure we're going to get into talking about to CIYT and the RYT. designations. So
I think Marcia might be frozen.
yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe it's Stefan. What about you? How did you get there?
Oh, I wasn't quite as straight on as you. It was a little more winding. So I came over from Sweden. I went to school in Arkansas to get my PT degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked as a physical therapist, but I also felt like there was something missing in that world. So like Molly, I got involved with somatics. I did 4 years of training as a Feldenkrais teacher. And even with that, there was something that wasn't quite there. There were some pieces missing here and there. Then I met John Kepner. He used to be the executive director of IAYT in Arkansas when I worked on my PhD.
Right.
And he just asked me to teach a little bit of anatomy and help out with IAYT. And in 2010, he asked me to moderate a section at the annual meeting for IAYT. And of course, it was in California. And I went, yeah, I'll go to California. And when I was there, the yoga therapists that were in attendance were so insightful. It wasn't the cutthroat that I see in the physical therapy world, but they were insightful, helpful, and nice. And I thought, I want to be that nice too, because I wasn't. Maybe I'm still not that nice. So I actually, my friend Matt Taylor actually showed me or introduced me to some of the people that had yoga therapy programs. Mm-hmm. And I signed up for one of them, and I started the yoga therapy 3 or 4 weeks later. And then I started teaching in a few programs here and there. And Marcia was one of my brilliant students, and I learned so much from the students. And so I went from IAYT to Yoga Alliance, and I feel allegiance very strongly with both groups, because I think while they are different, they're also extremely valuable for the profession of yoga as a whole. And now I teach physical therapy. I'm a professor here at Nazareth College, but I involve ideas from yoga and from somatics and so forth, because I think the influence of yoga on me has been huge in the way I teach and in what I teach. And I think in healthcare, we can really benefit from it.
Well, Stefan, I'm so excited that yoga made you into the nice guy that I met.
Yeah, you should have seen me before yoga.
Oh my, I mean, I get it, right? Isn't that the way that yoga actually works and yoga therapy? It allows us to do our own self-study and to work on ourselves. And the other thing that I love that both of you guys shared is that you can be a member in both organizations. Having our ERYT 500, I have the same, and also having the CIAYT really expands this opportunity to expand our profession. And so Molly, I loved how you came into this kind of like on a little, hey, let me see what happens. I love this. I love somatics. I love Ayurveda. And Stefan, you had your CIAYT, and then you said, oh, let me tap into Yoga Alliance as well. So thank you guys for sharing, because the important thing is this: you can come into the yoga path from so many different directions. As Molly pointed out, some colleagues may be mental health professionals, some colleagues may be yoga teachers, some colleagues may say, you know what, I just love how yoga changed my life. And that's actually my story as well. It really allowed me to find who I was. And so I'm like my authentic self. So thank you so much for that. We're going to tap into another question. I'm so glad that you guys shared so much, because like many people that are logged on today, they may be wondering, do I have to have specific requirements in order to become a registered yoga teacher or a CIAYT. And so I'd like to start with you, Stefan, first. What do you think, from your perspective, are the key differences between the RYT designation that you have and your CIAYT designation?
Well, I think this part of it is a process of how I approach clients from a yoga teacher perspective compared to a CIAYT perspective. The intake is different. The focus is somewhat different. Both as a yoga teacher and as a yoga therapist, there's no doubt yoga is healing. It has a healing effect.
Yeah.
As a yoga teacher, I can say, and I think it's okay to say, that we can do yoga for health. But when I come into the CIAYT, someone usually seeks me out for a more specific reason regarding their health, or it could be physical, it could be mental, whatever the practitioner tends to specialize in. And the process of intake is then somewhat different than me as a yoga teacher, where I work more with the general idea of the person's health. I think that's one of the big differences. And then if you look at education, as a yoga therapist, you have a different number of hours of education, and it delves into different aspects of the human being as a whole, both from a Western perspective and from a yoga perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, thank you for reminding us that when you become a yoga teacher and you decide to become a yoga therapist also, you don't get rid of any of your knowledge base. You actually just expand your toolbox. And so I'm glad to hear that, like me, you also are still operating as a yoga teacher and as a yoga therapist, and really using this whole intake process to really meet our clients where they are, to really tap into how they're doing physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. So thank you so much. That was awesome. Wouldn't have expected anything different from you. And now, Molly, what about you? Have you thought about this a little bit, about how you use both of your credentials?
Yeah, I mean, and I think maybe just speaking a little bit to some of the differences in how they're built. I mean, we at Yoga Alliance, we can have a foundational credit of 200 hours plus, right? We have the ability to teach classes. We have the ability to serve people and to be with people well there. Then we start maybe get more curious and ask for a bit more advanced training, a set of hours and some curriculum that has more to offer us, that we get that next step. I knew I wanted that right away, right? So I went on to that 500 hours. Now, either that 200 hour or that 500 hour, you can definitely have an incredible skill set to work with people, to maintain health, to work with fitness on all the levels, right? On so many different levels. But then what I think about with a CIAYT, for me, it felt like going to a graduate program. And I didn't go to a formal graduate program, like I said. And so thinking of it for me like a graduate program, it's CIYTs have a minimum of 800 hours that they complete. And in fact, many of the accredited schools offering yoga therapy certifications are well over 800 hours. Our Yoga North is over 1,000 hours. You know, that's thought of as a generalist yoga therapist, and then we specialize from there. And then if I think about the differences in my abilities or what I do with these two designations, the other thing to say is that I have some really specific skills around how to work with assessments and how to integrate medical terminology, how to integrate my work with maybe some of the medical fields into the assessments I do, and then into a plan that's really individualized that I start working with clients or working with small groups, so that I really can incorporate all of this. I've got maybe some biomedical, maybe some different therapeutic skills that I bring to the table. And I might even have, for me, I think that I grew my ability to have therapeutic relationships in different ways with clients. And not that at 200 and 500 hour, I didn't have those, but I keep expanding on my horizons in a way, and my ability to hone into that work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that really reminds us when we go back to the philosophy of yoga, the sutras in particular, that there are just many paths, right? But one truth, which is really helping our clients improve in regards to their well-being. And so I love that, Molly, you're able to really just continue to broaden your knowledge base and add on to that, adding in assessment and intake and really customizing what the client needs based on yoga, right? I mean, that's the cool thing.
It's all based on yoga, right? It is.
All, yes, it's all based on yoga.
And Marsha, one more thing I think I want to really bring up is that in a yoga therapy program, for me, the certification programs, what was one of the most important things was a mentored practicum, which I think is a little bit different. I think in 200 and 500 hours, we do some practicum, but when we start moving toward that CIYT, there's 180 hours total that you have to dedicate to making sure that you can have that therapeutic relationship, that you can start working those skills. And I think we have that at the 200 and 500 hour levels in a different way. And so just really thinking about how you hone your skills and start bringing them to the people that you want to support.
Thank you, Molly, for adding that. I mean, you're so right. This is really an opportunity to look at the 200-hour level, look at the 300-hour level, which we're so grateful that Yoga Alliance allows us to have those paths. And then today, look at this. We're coming together to expand the profession of yoga, to show the unification and say, if you want to explore, well, that's the trauma-sensitive aspect of this, right? It's your choice. If you choose to continue to broaden your knowledge base, then you can look at an IAYT accredited program and add that in. You know, I really loved all the years when I was a 200-hour yoga teacher, and then a 300, and then a ERYT 500, and then the YSEP. We're not even talking about that today, but there's so many paths that Yoga Alliance and IAYT really provide for us as a profession. Who would have known that this thing that we probably all kind of stumbled into would give us a path that's so expansive? And the other thing, Molly, that you pointed out, and then we'll go to another question, was about the schools. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about being able to offer your programs at the 200-hour, 300-hour, and the yoga therapy.
Sure. I mean, I think that's a big part of why we're having this conversation today, is because the shift in the policy of Yoga Alliance around how we can talk about our training programs, we do offer a 200-hour, and we really have a therapeutic approach to yoga. And we spent a long time trying to figure that out, who we are and who we wanted to try to help support. And so it's really great that now with this shift in policy, that our 200-hour and our 500-hour can really talk about the focus and can go more deeply into that therapeutic approach to what we do. We do a thing called Soma Yoga that blends this piece of somatics with the ancient, incredible skills and tools of yoga. And then at our CIYT level, that certification program, we of course have to meet many, many guidelines, many, many standards that take that deeper. And we invite other experts in the field into that work as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for touching on that for us. Like you, being a Yoga Alliance school at the 200-hour and 300-hour, and then having the IAYT school as well, allows us to meet so many more people in this world. And so that's really what this is about. So having the ability to meet the client where they are and choose for us as yoga schools and yoga practitioners and yoga teachers, which path resonates with us. So Stefan, I don't want you to feel left out because, you're one of my first teachers. So I'm going to come back to you, and I'm just going to wonder, what do you think the two, and I think you touched on this a little bit already, what do you think the two profession paths have in common?
Well, what they have in common is yoga.
Very good.
Is that enough of an answer?
Well,
I'm
no,
so brilliant.
actually,
What can I say?
I know you're very brilliant. That's why you have the doctor name and all of that. But Stefan, we need a little bit more from you.
Right.
Tell us a little bit more.
Well, I think, and to tie into a little bit what Molly said, I think the benefit now of looking at the education of both organizations too, a person who starts with their 200, which is somewhat of a foundation in yoga that they can then move on to, but they can stay in the same school to go through 200, 300, and then up to the IAYT, which I think is a big benefit, without the school having to, I mean, they have to kind of follow the guidelines for both organizations, but today it's much easier to do it with the new policy than what it used to be. So the benefit to the student, because we always have to look at what is the benefit of a student here, what is the benefit of the profession, is also that the student can now follow a similar philosophy throughout the whole. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that is very, very important. Not that there's anything wrong necessarily with learning more than one philosophy about things, but for your basic knowledge, I think it's good to really ground yourself in a philosophy and in one approach to yoga. And by being able to do both the Yoga Alliance and the IAYT certification in the same school, I think it's a huge benefit, because it ties things together, and the student can really feel that, you know, there is a connection between the yoga teacher training and the IAYT training here. And it makes more sense, instead of saying the yoga teacher training is here, IAYT training is over here, and the two never meet. I think we bring a wholeness, and yoga is about unity and wholeness, right? So I think this just brings it together at a different level, thanks to the new policy that Yoga Alliance and IAYT have worked out together.
Yes, that's an important point. And thank you for reminding me about that. This work today is so awesome because these two organizations have come together to create this opportunity to establish this policy. And with this policy, it just expands the yoga world. It expands the yoga therapy world. And also it allows us, as Stefan pointed out, to really see a continuum of education that's more interconnected. And so this is awesome. I'm thankful that you brought that up. So Molly, it's your chance to kind of jump in and just give us a little bit about, you know, what the commonalities are and really what your experience has been since you also have those different schools.
Well, you know, Marcia, one of the things I wanted to say is, you know, I think the question you asked was, what do these professions hold in common? And for me, there is so much. There's so much that we have to unify around, and supporting yoga and yoga therapy is really a viable, important profession, both professions in the broad field of wellness. And I think, you know, that broad field of wellness, as I'm talking about, goes from physical fitness and wellness to even being instrumental in building a whole health system, perhaps, where there's equity when it comes to finding whole being, well-being. This is something we need in our world. And if we can keep reminding people that yoga and yoga therapy is an integral part of that, our unification of purpose, as Alyssa Wustrel, our ED at IAYT would say, is going to help that. You know, when we're not divisive, when we're actually coming together, as you know, Stefan just said, it's about unity. And I know at IAYT we want to do that. We want to you know, link up with integrative fields, with Yoga Alliance, with NAMA, in service of, frankly, reducing suffering, right? We want to reduce suffering. That's why I came. I wanted to reduce my own suffering. And then that's why I stayed, because I wanted to keep saying, let's look around and see how we can make a more whole world together. And we can do that better when we're together. No doubt about it.
Thank you so much. And that's exactly it. That's why I fell in love with yoga and yoga therapy. You know, coming from the technical world, the engineering world, there's a lot of situations where people are not taking advantage of working together and the collaboration. And so this today is so awesome. Mark it on your calendars if you haven't, that we had this conversation today, because this is the beginning of an opportunity to really change the world and really tap into the inclusiveness of yoga and yoga therapy. And you guys really hit it on the nail on the head here. The commonality is yoga. I mean, that's why we're all here today, listening in on this call and having this amazing conversation. Because when we look at yoga from the physical perspective, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual perspective, when we look at the breath, the pranayama, how we started this session together, when we look at mudras, and really when we tap into all the aspects of meditation, we are so blessed in this yoga and yoga therapy community, because we can alleviate or mitigate suffering for ourselves as well as for those that we're serving. So thank you, Molly and Stefan, for really tapping into what the commonalities are. Now, the next question, oh yes, Molly.
Well, I just wanted to say, and so now what, I think one of our goals wants to be is providing more access and creating more impact in the world with this. How do we get this to more people in people who don't necessarily have access to it? That's a big piece of what we want to do.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's something that's dear to my heart. And I think that combining the efforts of both organizations and really tapping into the massive number of yoga teachers and yoga therapists that we have, we can really strengthen our ability to increase access. This is something that the world needs. And as we're going through this pandemic, it's even more important that we ensure that these modalities are in hospitals, in day programs, that we go into homeless shelters, that we really go into places where all beings should be heard, valued, and seen. So thank you, Molly, of emphasizing the importance of accessibility and inclusivity as we come together as these two organizations. Stefan, yes.
So I think there's one more thing about yoga too that we have to tap into. Yoga worldwide, and I know it's worldwide, but I'll mostly speak about the North America because I have more numbers on that. 30 million people at least for some reason got attached to yoga, and they said this is a good thing. So it's not only, and from that it spreads out into schools, it spreads out into everything, and they started with the physical, but then they're moving on. And see, this really affects my whole life in various ways, my relationships, spiritual, emotional, and so forth. And I think yoga is not the only thing that can do that, but it caught fire. And we have so many people doing it that are spreading it to so many different organizations and walks of life that we have to utilize this for the whole world, because we can really change things, because it really took off for some reason. And I think it's a really unique opportunity to really change things.
You're so right. This is a unique opportunity for us, especially in the middle of a pandemic where people are dealing with isolation, where people are dealing with injuries, and where people are dealing with just reconnecting with their bodies. And so this is an opportunity where we can change the world. And look how many yoga teachers there are, how many yoga therapists there are. And like Stefan said, you can't go anywhere without finding someone who wants to talk about yoga. I'm saying in the grocery stores, at the doctor's office, and your mental health provider's offices. So everyone is referring people to yoga. And when we look at this united profession, these multiple paths, then that means that we can touch a lot more people, not just in North America, but globally. And with this pandemic, we're learning that even more. Molly, did you want to add something else? No, okay.
No, I mean, we're saying it.
We're doing a great job. Well, we only really have a couple more thoughts that we want to tap into before we go to our question and answer period, which Krista will be joining in to help us with that piece. But this is it. When we look at the scope of practice, of a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are around the scope of practice. And I know they're like long documents, so we're not really wanting to dive deep into all of the details, but what are your thoughts about having those scope of practice in place?
Stefan, you want to start us out?
All right, I'll start us out. I think being a physical therapist, being a fellow arts practitioner, interacting with other professions, to be a profession, you need to have a scope of practice. Mm-hmm. It needs to be clearly delineated about what we can and what we cannot do. And I think both organizations have done a very nice job working on the scope of practice. It's very clear for their members what they are doing and so forth. Now, Yoga Alliance with the old policy on yoga therapy was, I'd say, a little heavy-handed, maybe, to say the least, because there were a lot of people attacking me on that one. Even though I didn't have anything to do with it, I'll say that. But I think it's important what Yoga Alliance did by saying, you know, we are yoga teachers. Because there were a lot of people that were yoga teachers who said, I'm a yoga therapist too. And we have to remember that Yoga Alliance train yoga teachers. Let's not forget that. We talk about health, we talk about those benefits, but we are here for yoga teachers. And the new policy says, if you are also a yoga therapist, that's okay. But please, on your website or on the registry, please say, show your credentials. If you claim to be a yoga therapist, show your credentials that support that. Because Yoga Alliance is very clear. We are educating yoga teachers, not yoga therapists. And that is exactly the way it should be. And I think our scope of practice is also extremely clear on that. And I'm very, very happy that both organizations have clarity around their scope of practice, because it's crucial for a profession.
Thank you so much. That's exactly right. I refreshed my memory this morning and looked over both of them, the scope of practice for being a yoga teacher and being a yoga therapist. And you're right, it gives clarity, not just to yoga teachers and yoga therapists, but to all the people that we're serving in this world. So this is an opportunity to educate ourselves, but also to educate those that we're going to be serving. Molly, what are your thoughts about this scope of practice around yoga teachers and yoga therapists?
Yeah, maybe I'll speak a little bit to the IAYT version of it. Just that's probably the most uppermost in my mind right now. I mean, there's I think a 6-page document on that, on scope of practice. There's almost an hour-long video on ethics that has been made. That's really an informative video from lots of different people around ethics and yoga therapy. And there is even, I think, a video being made about scope of practice for CIYTs so that we really get this in. And I think this has all been part of a process of self-regulating. I think both Yoga Alliance and IAYT really believe that we should regulate ourselves. We should be looking inward all the time. This is part of yoga. And we should also be saying, we know what's in our scope of practice. We know it's okay for us to do this. And then there are some pieces that we really want to make sure that we hand off, that we know how to refer out, that we know how to contact the people in our, in our circles that can support those other things. One of the things to say as a yoga therapist, we've already spoke to assessments. We've also talked about integrating different information into the work we do, which I don't think at my TT training, my yoga training originally, I knew how to do some of that. I didn't really quite know how to do that. So when I started taking my CIYT trainings, what was happening is I really got to be able to figure out how to document. I knew how to work with a personalized plan for specific health concerns, and how to help the student, the client, the person that I'm sitting with, that to be able to find what their health goals are around that. Now, I think it's important to say, of course, we're looking at a person moving toward whole being, well-being, but that looks different for everybody. I might have a chronic condition and my health will never look like it did when I was in my 20s. But as a yoga therapist, I really feel like the scope of practice is helping a person move down that path of wellness at, personalized and individualized, with all of the contraindications and concerns really understood. And I think that's part of the scope of practice there.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. I think that the point that you brought up is really valuable for us today as we look at expanding this yoga profession and yoga therapy. The reality is, when you look at the educational standards and the competencies that are required for being a yoga teacher, as Stefan pointed out, Yoga Alliance is here to really support yoga teachers. And IAYT is really here to support yoga therapists. But look at how many people we're going to be able to support the overall well-being of those that are out here in the world, including ourselves. So really adding in the tools from the 200-hour level, and then advancing those in the 300-hour level. And then if you want more, as Molly pointed out, you can broaden your education even more and explore the minimum additional 800 hours and become a yoga therapist, certified yoga therapist through IAYT. This is awesome. So we only have I thought so. We only have a couple minutes left before we're going to go to our question and answer period. And I know that we've probably touched on this a little bit, but I want to be just a little bit more specific about it. How do you think that the yoga community and the yoga therapy community are safer and braver spaces because of this new policy? Who wants to jump in?
I mean, I'm happy to
take that question again, Marsha.
Yeah.
Repeat the question. The question is this: how does this new policy help create safer, braver yoga spaces?
I think that the new policy will create safer, braver places by showing the commonalities and showing that two organizations are working together for the benefit of yoga, for the benefit of our students, for the benefit of teachers, of therapists. And by doing that, by having a civilized discussion about this, by getting together, by finding commonalities, but also differences that we can agree on and that we can live with, we're also showing the world, including our politicians, that this can be done. And if we show that in yoga, and if two organizations are showing that, we can be a model for other organizations, how they can work together, even though historically, after that first little hiccup with the policy, we said, let's figure this out and let's work together. And now we have come together, even though there was friction between us initially. And I think we can be a model for organizations, for politicians, for religions, what have you, that, we can come together. And by doing that, our yoga studios, yoga schools, whatever, is a safer, braver place, because both organizations said, we're brave enough to say, neither one was really right here. We really messed this up. Let's get together, let's heal, and that will affect yoga as a whole. And I think we're a model because of that.
I think you're so right. This really is an opportunity for us to serve as a model. I mean, we're so blessed because we have yoga, the sutras, the Bhagavad Gita. It tells us how to show up in the world. And when we have differences, we come together, we talk through, we build relationships, and it's just going to make us stronger as a community. So Molly, what about you?
Well, I just want to echo that because, we had, of course, a little planning meeting for this meeting. And I was really touched by the sincerity and the willingness to kind of open hearts and say, how do we do this together? How do we correct the things that did not go well between us? How do we not keep defended? And I think that that's an aspect of yoga and of our work that you're bringing up. And that was a highlight for me and why I'm so excited to be part of both organizations, right? This is how I want to live my life. And that's how yoga is, continuing to teach me. So that's one thing. I mean, I think really echoing that. But I also think, as Stefan said, that there's also ways that now we're going to really be able to help students and clients get to the yoga spaces that they particularly need, for the support they need, for the specialization maybe even that they need. And we're able to be more clear and more lucid about who we are, each one of our individual schools, each one of our individual studios, who we are and what we work with, so that it can be inclusive, but it can also but tell a person, this is where you might want to come for this kind of work. And I think it's important to be able to say who we are, because our differences make this many petaled lotus, and that's the real truth of it. And so let us highlight our differences in the spirit of unification, so that we know how much good information and how much good resources there are. Let's get people to the right resources.
Yes, and I'll amplify that. Being welcome, valued, and seen in both organizations just warms my heart. I mean, I really love that we're here today. If you haven't written it on your calendar, mark it. Again, remember, if you haven't marked down today as a very important step in terms of us coming together to amplify the differences, but also to amplify the commonalities. This is an important day. So spread the word, go out this evening, have a cup of tea with family and friends and colleagues and say, guess what? Yoga Alliance and IAYT have come together and the world is going to be forever changed. So now we need to go on and tap into bringing Krista in, because Stefan has to go do more important work.
I'm not sure I have to do more important work. My students would love for me to hang out here, but I have to go give final exams now. So all my niceness will be blown away. I'm back to being a professor again. Love you guys.
Love you, Stefan.
Love you, Stefan. You're so awesome. So before we jump into the actual question and answer period, I want to introduce Dr. Krista. That's what I'm going to call her today. She's a yoga teacher, a yoga educator, a yoga student, and a yoga scholar. And really her expertise today is along the lines of standards and making sure that we have amazing yoga teacher training programs. And so here we are having the opportunity to really tap into this place of continuing this conversation. And so what we're going to do now is tap into the questions that are coming in through our Q&A chat. Okay, so wow, we sure have a lot of them. So I'm going to start with the first one of the peers, and we'll see, Molly or Dr. Krista, which one who would like to answer this. Can you speak to the practice of yoga therapy and use of the words yoga therapy by individuals who are licensed mental health providers, counselors, psychologists, social workers, and also they're yoga teachers, but they do not have the IAYT? That's our first question. And that one is really an amazing one to start with.
It sure is. I'm happy to talk about that from the Yoga Alliance perspective, Molly. So this is definitely something that we thought about in terms of how we were writing both the new scope of practice as well as the new policy, and wanting to make sure from our lens and our lane that we were as inclusive as possible. So from the Yoga Alliance perspective, as a few people brought up already, we are in the business of credentialing yoga teachers, and also wanting going forward to make relationships and to help facilitate the professions and pathways of specialization that yoga teachers take as they go forward in their professions, their careers, and their lifelong practices. So because of that, we have in our scope of practice been very intentional in noting, especially in principle 2 and 5, that you are a yoga teacher if you graduate from a 200, 300, or 500 hour program. However, we are no longer saying that you are not allowed to utilize or to disseminate the wisdom that you have based on the credentials that you have earned. So we ask that you teach within the scope of practice that you have, and those credentials could be myriad. So if you have a medical profession or a medical degree, please feel free to utilize that in your yoga teaching, as long as you have those proper credentials and can really back it up. And so, as I said, we want to think about the yoga therapy thing and the IAYT as one pathway to professionalization. We also do not want to disclude those who have lots of education in related fields and would like to bring their yoga teaching to those as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Molly, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I do. I want to just say that very similar to Yoga Alliance, that we want folks that have complementary and other fields to come into the yoga therapy profession. We do really believe that learning yoga therapy is different than going through PT school, or learning yoga therapy is different than becoming a doctor of something, right? So you want to be able to have the education in both fields. That's my understanding. I know that there are courses and there are things to allow ourselves to bring therapeutics to other fields, but to be a certified yoga therapist, you've got to go through a training, or at least that pathway, PRNE they call it, portfolio review. Soon we'll also have a certification exam that will be part of it. That's part of our continuing movement toward professionalism within the CIYT world.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Molly. That really helps clarify where we are today, and also Dr. Krista, because we're really promoting honor all of the certifications and degrees that you have, bring them in. It's only going to really make our profession even stronger, but make sure you have the credentials to support them. That's really what we're saying. We have a follow-up question. Can you talk about how close we are to having yoga classes and/or yoga therapy being covered by insurance? And this is always a great question.
Yeah, I think, I do really believe that there are going to be some more conversations and some more of these community conversations that Yoga Alliance and IAYT are going to hold. And I bet you that's going to be a piece of one of those conversations. And I think, there are many views on this. Some people feel really like it should happen. Some people feel like it shouldn't happen. And I think that what I can say from IAYT is we're really studying and looking at all of the benefits and what might detract from it. And I don't think we have the perfect answer yet, right? So I think it's a stay tuned. I think it's a live into this question a little bit more.
Dr. Krista?
Yeah, I would just totally agree with what Molly said, and recognize, I think, in the moment we live in yoga, especially after the pandemic and the ways in which people are really seeing the need for wellness, I think, especially in how yoga fits into that in a new way. I think that we are at this sort of precipice of different ways of bridging the worlds of yoga and education, yoga and, medicine, yoga and so as we do that, I think it's really important that we're responsible and accountable for how that looks. But as Molly said, I think this is sort of a moving target and a conversation we need to have in community. So to really make sure that we are keeping the idea of yoga and this sort of historical tradition, South Asian, Krishnamacharya, yoga therapy as a broader conversation, as well as understanding the ways in which that has been placed in a Western framework and layers of responsibility. And so that, I think, is something that we would all want to hear from you in terms of how we do this in the best way as we continue to honor tradition, as well as move towards sort of innovation and holistic health in the future.
Awesome. Well, it looks like time is really coming to an end here, but I do have a couple more questions. This is the one that many people are asking. I have seen several 300-hour Yoga Alliance registered programs that were focused on therapeutic yoga, or were the first part of an 800-hour plus IAYT program. Is the Yoga Alliance allowing therapeutic focused 300-hour programs now?
So yeah, so I think, you know, as Stefan brought up, and as we know, with the previous policy, there was a lot of sort of arbitrary limitations on the ways in which people could share their expertise and understandings of the credentials that they did have. So going forward, you know, really in the 200 hour, there's so much to cover from a foundational yogic sense. So in the 300 hour, if you have the proper credentials and you're an IAYT school and a yoga Alliance school, and the teachers have the proper credentials to teach, we definitely want there to be not withholding of your expertise or those sort of therapeutic foundational tools that one can learn and is part of sort of that learning journey. So yes, we no longer want you to have to arbitrarily, I'm thinking of the word bifurcate, which is a very large word, but that you know, that you don't have to live in two different worlds, that if you are a yoga therapist, please feel free to bring your expertise in, but once again, always refer to the scope of practice in terms of where those limitations, and recognize that if you graduate from a 300 hour or a 500 hour under the IAYT banner, that you are graduating as a yoga teacher and never as a yoga therapist. So I guess that would be my sort of thought on that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think I'll ask Molly the final question here. Someone's asking, what are the requirements hour requirements in order to become a CIAYT? So how many hours, how do we find the schools, and how do we actually tap into if we want to add trauma in and mental health? So these are the kinds of questions that are coming in today.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, you need to get your 200 hour done first. So first of all, get that done. Make sure you find a good school that you resonate with and that you want to work with, and then find your way. You can find your way after that to IAYT and find an 800 plus hour program. As we just stated, there are programs within Yoga Alliance also that are 300 hour plus programs that are yoga therapy based programs. My program's like that, and I think yours too maybe is like that. So, oh look, we've got a wonderful graphic here. The 200 hour, the 500 hours. Some 500 hours are therapeutic focused or yoga therapy focused, are maybe a level 1 or a part 1 of a yoga therapy or CIYT certification. And so that certification, then you have to finish at least 800 hours total. You have to do an 150 hour practicum plus at least 30 hours of mentored practicum. And then you have to have time in and teaching and time in and doing sessions. So, you know, those are the basic guidelines there. And, you know, you can find these resources right on IAYT, on Yoga Alliance websites. And even, you know, there's lots of different information, and there's so many different programs that might meet different needs for different people.
Well, thank you so much. We're getting close to the last couple of minutes of this session. We do want to honor all the lineages that contribute into yoga. And we really want to make sure that we honor all of our ancestors that have provided information to us so that we can spread this wonderful gift, yoga and yoga therapy. We want to also thank Dr. Krista for joining us specifically for this question and answer period. And so I want to use our final moments together to allow both Krista and Molly to just give your final closing comments before we look forward to the next session together. So I'll start with Dr. Krista and then Molly.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And I have really gotten to be a part of the scope of practice and the conversations with IAYT and conversations with yoga therapists. And I'm very grateful and thankful that we live and work in a community that is so willing to come together to continue to want to be of service. And in terms of this conversation as well, we are going to continue to have the conversation, to refine, to, you know, think about how education plays a role in this, and that we will be having further conversations about our yoga therapy policy, as well as the scope and code and other pieces that play into this going forward. So if you have continued questions, feel free to both reach out to Yoga Alliance or stay tuned for the further webinars. And just a huge, massive thank you to you all for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Krista. Molly.
Well, first, I want to say that I feel like I'm having a big sigh of relief that these two places that I hold so dear are coming together. I mean, that is the first thing to say, and I hope that we all can feel that the unification of purpose is so fantastic. That unity feels so good. And then I think that I was thinking about a closing remark, and I actually pulled up the statement, and I don't think I can say it any better than a piece of the statement, so I'm just going to read it. And that is from our joint statement from Yoga Alliance and IAYT. And it says, together, Yoga Alliance and IAYT are committed to unifying members of the yoga community to create greater access to the practice of yoga and validating its benefits within various disciplines, including healthcare. We are pleased to be working alongside one another to further the multitude of avenues for professional and personal growth in the field of yoga. And I really just feel like that is the spirit of this conversation and the conversations we will be having going forward, even on the days that we might not always agree on things, but that we have the spirit of wanting to seek connection. And so I'm so excited about that.
Well, thank you both so much. And thank you to Stefan as you're giving that final exam to your students in this moment. Thank you so much for allowing us to come together and really model what it looks like to work together, to build relationships, to do our own self-study, to show compassionate action. So it's right at the top of the hour. We are so grateful that you took the time out of your day to be here with us. And we look forward to future collaborative efforts together. If you want, bring your hands to heart center, and maybe just close your eyes for a moment and just think about how grateful we are for this amazing day. We look forward to seeing each and every one of you out here serving our clients and really making this world a better place. Go in peace, go in peace, go in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.